They were looking into the camera and telling you this. Did you need to do that? I think I was kind of picking up what you were laying down there. It felt a little obnoxious to me at points.
I think the reason it felt so obnoxious is because they made the point. They made a point again. And just in case you missed it, here's the point again.
3 times. Yeah, it's a little too much. Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the new movie, Poor Things.
Rebecca, let's get started.
Bella is a bit of a mismatched soul, seeing as her mature body is paired with a child's brain, and wants to explore the world on her own terms. When the family's lawyer, Duncan Wedderburn, sees this opportunity to exploit Bella for his own ends, she naively goes along with him, only to find that the world isn't what she's expecting it to be. Bella soon realizes the question she wants most to learn is not, what is the world, but rather, who am I in the world?
Rebecca, we've been seeing this trailer for Poor Things for, oh my gosh, what, months before the whole SAG-AFTRA strike?
I am Bella Baxter. I'm a flawed, experimenting person.
Feels like we've been seeing this for about a year, and then it was really funny because during the SAG-AFTRA strike, they're like, you cannot promote your own projects, and then Emma Stone shows up with a previously recorded.
My name is Emma Stone. I am playing Bella Baxter in the film Poor Things.
Yes,
I love this movie.
Yes, I know. A lot of hype around this movie.
This movie right now is one of the most positively reviewed movies in Hollywood.
I thought it might be good. I was cautiously optimistic. I think you were as well.
I think I was definitely more optimistic than you. I know you'd mentioned that you were afraid of another Beau's Afraid scenario.
I was definitely afraid of that. I'm excited though, right? The Lobster, The Favorite, and pretty good movies, same director, had the potential.
Yorgos is quickly becoming one of those I must see what he's going to do next kind of guys.
Wow. You're right, though. The Beau is Afraid.
I love that movie.
I agree, though. I'm thinking if it's a Beau is Afraid, it's hard pass. But Emma Stone's in it. You like Emma Stone?
I love Emma taking these risks with her cinematography.
I am Bella Baxter, and there is a world to enjoy, circumnavigate.
It's nice to see her not play safe compared to some of our other favorite actors we enjoy, like Anne Hathaway.
I love cleaning.
Cleanliness is close to godliness.
When my patients are talking, I imagine getting inside their heads with disinfectant and just scrubbing them down.
The Box family favorite. Obviously, Mark Ruffalo, near and dear to my heart. I couldn't say no, and I was laughing in the trailer, right? He's doing the whole Streetcar Named Desire, where he's all, Bella! And I'm thinking,
think that's what sold you.
I think, truly, sadly, I think that is what sold me. Emma Stone, yeah, it's pretty good. Cinematography looks kind of interesting. Interesting premise. What, Mark Ruffalo's in this movie? Yeah, I know, I'm a low bar, I'm sorry. Casting was good, though, I will say. I enjoyed that. And William Dafoe.
William Dafoe always brings his freakiest for the indie directors, and I'm just a
hilarious.
Sucker for that. You know, he actually went to mortuary school to prepare for this role.
That's hardcore.
Right?
I'm like, yay. No, and you're right. We like him too. I was excited. The acting was actually pretty good in this.
Bella.
Why keep it in my mouth if it is revolting? I must go punch that baby.
Which isn't surprising, right? The names that are attached to the movie.
One of the things I was worried about was this would veer so sharply into caricature territory.
Oh, okay.
This is Bella. Bella, this is Mr. McCandles.
Hello, Bella.
And
it did at certain moments.
Yeah, I was going to say, you make it sound like it did not. And
no, it did.
It kind of did.
Mr. Mark Ruffalo's mustache.
Yeah. Oh, right.
But I think it was caricature in the way that it was presenting ideas.
And there were a lot of ideas. You and I were talking about this on the way back from the movie and, coming to the studio, that there were some parts of it that were just lighthearted and just kind of, we hope you'll figure it out. And then there were some parts where like, we want you to know this. We are going to make this point. I'm like, did you need to do that? I think I was kind of picking up what you were laying down there. It felt a little obnoxious to me at points.
I think the reason it felt so obnoxious is because they made the point. They made a point again. And just in case you missed it, here's the point again.
Yeah, that's like parenting. It's like, come on.
And you would know.
You would know. Yeah, it felt that way, and I didn't like that.
So you felt like as an audience member, you were kind of being belittled in that situation?
Yes, Dr. Rebecca, I did. It did feel that way a bit. And I understand if you want to insert it a little bit later or if there's a subtle way of doing it, but there were just parts of it where it felt like they were looking into the camera and telling you this. I didn't like that.
It just felt like too much.
3 times. Yeah, a little too much. Honestly, the screenplay didn't grab me in general. I understand, right? It's a book. It's the origin is from a book, and I haven't read the book. Have you read the book?
No, but I do know some of the author's style, so I wasn't surprised it was so ham-fisted at certain points and certain themes being brought up. But that being said, a film is quite different medium than a book. In a book, you have a little bit more space between the pages, so you might lose your audience in the drop-off. The film, you have a very limited amount of time with your audience, so anything you repeat, the audience will stick with. If you keep hammering it home to the point of parody, as we said earlier, the audience just starts to go, get on with it.
Alistair Gray, who authored the book, there were a few details in the screenplay that I actually liked. There were postcards that Bella, Emma Stone, was sending back to William Dafoe, God, her maker. There's a whole Frankenstein piece around that, literally. But the illustrations, I was thinking, I wish I had read the book, because my thought was, those are probably the illustrations, right? Because he's known for putting illustrations in his book.
That's one of the things you always ask me after we see these movies is, are you going to seek out the book? I am, partially because I want to see how Yorgos translated the book to this movie, especially since Yorgos said that he took him to several locations and said specifically, this is what I was thinking of when I was writing this.
There was thought to it, and I don't want to dismiss that there was no thought. It didn't feel like random musings from a Scottish author. I think there was thought put into it. However, the heavy-handedness I didn't particularly like. The story, I know you and I had talked about, there were parts of the story I didn't like, because honestly, it was very sexual, which I understand that that's not the issue. It's for Bella to become a woman and for her to mature, right? We were talking about her child brain and her maturing and growing. It felt like that was the primary way that they said, this is how she will mature and grow and come into her own.
I think the part that made it painful for me was not because of the physicality that the Enlightenment was described as.
Sure.
I think the thing that made it painful for me was Bella is described as involving herself in all of these other fields, like musical art.
Correct.
Medicinal knowledge.
Yes.
And yet, almost to the detriment of the story,
yes,
Bella's physicality is demonstrated. I don't really get so much of a hint of the other things that she is being described as learning more, unless it's in these small, little, micro
blink and you'll miss it
moments.
Yes.
Of demonstration.
I was disappointed at that, because they were saying, oh, she's reading more, and there's like one scene where she's in the cabin of the ship where she's reading, and oh, she wants to get to know people. She's talking to a woman who looks like my grandmother, literally. And that was the extent of it. And then one of the other passengers, he was talking with her a little bit, her dancing. There was a scene with her and Mark Ruffalo dancing, which I actually really liked. I thought that was a beautiful scene. It communicated a ton. And I would have loved to have seen more scenes around that, rather than, well, she's trying to earn money and this will help further her. And I'm like you said, she's suddenly has this wonderful knowledge of being a surgeon. Unpack that more. Wouldn't that
literally,
be
we only
interesting?
spent like 5 minutes in this.
Yes.
And I felt like it was almost a tragedy to Bella.
It was. It made her feel very single dimension. And as we said, there is a part of that, which I understand that the sexuality part was important in the story, the way that they wanted to tell it. However, I think that that's a mistake, and I think that is a cultural thing where you think, oh, if people are open sexually or if they have expanded their horizons by, I don't know, multiple partners and all that, it was like,
that's not all there is to this character.
No, and I was hoping that we would, like you said, see more of her character develop in other ways, because in my mind, she was being exploited multiple times. And it's like, is there something more to that? Even though it shifted it in the movie that, oh, she's not just being exploited, she's now in charge of all of this. And it was like, oh, well, I kind of still think she's being exploited.
I think that might be some of our culture creeping in, though.
Oh, of course. And that's fair. But like you said, I would have loved to have understood more how she became a surgeon in her, in her own right. I would love to hear how she made determinations with relationships, right? There was a relationship from the past, without spoiling it, that she wanted to go back and understand. That was an interesting piece, but why did she choose that? And I don't feel like I knew her well enough to know why she chose. I know
there's several competing theories among the team.
And maybe that was intentional. Hey, we don't want to spoil it, or we want you to come to your own conclusion. However, I would have loved to have heard why. The author obviously thinks about many things, and I would love to hear what was either the director, the screenwriter, the author, what was their thought around that?
I think the sticking point for me about so much of the sexuality is not that sexuality bothers me. Mm-hmm. It's purely because I know the director can handle the emotional gravitas of what Bella's going through.
Absolutely.
I've seen Yorgos's other works. I know he can do this.
Absolutely. And The Favorite was a great movie. The Lobster, I enjoyed The Lobster. To me, that had, it has depth. I'm laughing if people in the cinema community haven't seen The Lobster, like, how much depth does The Lobster actually have? But that movie had a lot of depth in my mind.
One of the things I always describe to people about why I love The Lobster, why I love The Favorite, why I think they're some of Yorgos's best work is purely because he takes the concept, which could be seen as abstract, human emotions.
Sure, absolutely.
But he gives it this outsider perspective that shows how comedic some of our responses can be. The Lobster is an excellent commentary on what it's like to live life in society alone and not being partnered.
The Favorite, you saw what, 3+ times in the theater?
With different audiences, yes. I saw The Favorite 3+ times in initial release.
That's a good point around the humor, though. There were parts of Poor Things that were comedic.
What do you keep doing that for?
A man over there repeated blinks at me.
I just think the increased physicality infantilized Bella, and the whole point of the story is her trying to find her agency. Her agency is not defined in one specific area.
That's correct. And had they set the stage that was the only way, I would have gone in going, okay, I understand, that's where it's at. But as you said, they were trying to make her multifaceted, multidimensional, and really growing. And I do think Emma Stone did a good job of evolving.
These two are fighting, and ideas are banging around in Bella's head and heart like lights in a storm.
Oh. You're always reading now, Bella. You're losing some of your adorable way of speaking.
I'm a changeable feast, as are all of we. Apparently, according to Emerson, disagreed with by Harry.
That is a hard place to play a real infant to an adult. She did a good job at that for what it was. I don't disparage that. You like the set design on this.
I like the set design because it felt like a place you could wander into, but it still felt hyper real. Like
it was very hyper real.
Like I was watching a stage play just from like the seats. Like I was looking down at the characters.
Yes.
Especially when you have motions like the fisheye lens, which is a motif that brought into it.
Correct. And I remember one of our team members said, boy, that's a lot of fisheye lens. And when you think about it, it's like, yeah, it kind of was. But you're right. The hyper real, it's funny. It almost has the Tim Burton feel to it.
I love how it communicates to the audience subconsciously that they are a voyeur in Bella's story in more than one way.
Yes. Oh, right.
But that perspective, I think, sometimes is divorced when we're watching a movie. Mm-hmm. we forget that we're living in a place outside of this movie. And I think that intentionality allows us to see that we're processing Bella's story through our own lenses.
Correct, which isn't fisheye, ironically. I think this movie does well in the theater, though, because, as you said, the hyper real, the coloring, and just the expansiveness, for the most part, of many, many scenes plays best in a theater.
This is a nice theater experience.
I would agree with that. Do we have any questions from the box?
Watching the trailer, the costumes looked very dynamic, very colorful, exaggerated in some ways. How do you think that helped or hurt the film?
I think the costuming did a really good job of communicating narrative. I was talking with Teresa that you could definitively see each character's arc through their costuming. I think a lot of costume designers struggle to find a narrative versus here's a closet for this character. As Bella became more and more autonomous, you saw her clothes shifted to a more modern silhouette. You saw that there was more lightness to the way that her clothes moved, as well as some of the cuts.
There was one scene, I think it was when she was in London, if I remember correctly, and God, her maker, was William Dafoe, right? And he was ill, and she was wearing all black. And I remember she was going into one of the buildings, and she had this pure black silhouette, which was so different than you're talking about, the hyper real. But I agree with you. I think the costuming pushed the envelope in the way that good costuming should. It should help tell the story, like you said, help propel, give us another layer of understanding of the characters.
I loved that scene specifically in costuming when she encounters God again.
Oh, right.
For one of the last times she'll encounter him in this narrative.
Sure.
Because you have her in almost this, what we would consider like a Wednesday Addams-like dress.
Correct. That's the one.
So she's taking that perspective of morbidity, that it's detached from her. Mm-hmm. But you also have God dressed in kind of this velvet-like dressing gown.
Yes.
And for those of us in our modern community, we might associate that with somebody like Hugh Hefner, who exploited women, but also championed them in his own way, according to himself. But it's interesting because then there's also that comfort. There's so many layers to this costuming. It excites me when costume designers take their job seriously.
And you love costuming. I love the fact that you are able to say this and this and this and this. And my hope and my suspicion is, right, that the costume designing team and the costume designer, that was their intent, to provide that either consciously or unconsciously. And I love the fact it wasn't hitting me over the head. It was, as you said, you just sat with it and you're like, oh. That's, to me, good job,
I get so excited. Those are little elbow moments that I just love
100%. 100%.
I'd like our cinema community to comment below. If you've seen this film, what costume do you think is most potent for the story?
Ooh, good question. Do we have any other questions from the box?
In a former life, I was a musician. As we were raised, Rebecca, music was a big part of our family. We owned several soundtracks in addition to other music. The music I found, I would never buy this soundtrack, but I found that it really lent to the film. It was very unique. It was grating at times, but not in a bad way. It helped the film when it was grating. What did you think of the music and how it lent itself to the film?
I think it added not only additional surrealist quality, it almost created this aspect of separation. The music in this film is, as you said, very jarring. In fact, I thought they were going to go with a Bella Bartok joke at some point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's where I thought they were going to go with this.
Yes.
But I think it added to just the dichotomy of, we see Bella as this thing, and she starts to become her own person. And the only other narrative we normally see that in is a horror movie. Bella turns horror movie tropes on her head with the emotional journey that she goes on.
That's interesting. Had it been billed as a horror movie, honestly, I think it may have hit the mark a little bit more for me, meaning the expectation. I know that there was one part when there was a lot of physicality or sexuality and, sex acts and all this craziness, that the music almost sounded like Psycho to me. It's like, wee, wee, wee. And I thought, oof, that's a little unsettling, but it made the point. That's what it's supposed to do. But it was jarring. I think jarring's a good word. And knowing our family's experience with music, your experience with music, I find it funny that comes up. We're like, oh my goodness, it's not just the costume. It's not just the screenplay. The music is a character in every movie we see, and how well they do it matters.
Well, it's also interesting to take alternate cuts from the soundtrack and layer them in different scenes of the movie. Even take some of the finished scenes and compare them with other soundtrack choices as well as repeating motifs. It's almost like the music is another layer of screenwriting.
Fendrix, the musician who was the composer of the score, my understanding this is his first film, and to me, pretty good for first film because his other music background is not around this. I think it fit, but it was unsettling to me. Rebecca, it is that time of the show where we review Poor Things 1 to 5 moths. What's your moth rating?
There might be some holes in my moths today.
Ooh, okay.
2 and a wing.
2 and a wing. Number one reason.
I felt like I was only getting half the story with Bella. It's a comprehensive movie, and I don't want to spoil it, but I felt like I was getting half of the story.
My moths are back. I would say, 1 to 5, I would give it a 2. It didn't have enough to feel above average. It had ideas. I think that was the biggest challenge for me, is it had ideas. I know we've talked about it before on Cocoon Cast, but it felt like different vignettes and they weren't fully fleshed out. They didn't have a definitive ending, although the ending of the movie did feel like an appropriate ending. But it just wasn't enough where I'm like, oh, I really want to see it again. I would love to own this and watch it multiple times. It just felt incomplete. And the hard part is I do compare it to the director's earlier works. And to me, it's not even, I'm just comparing to every film. It's no, his last two.
They landed so well for you.
They landed so much better for me than this one. And it was disappointing, and I have to make sure that I'm not ranking it lower because I was disappointed, but I was disappointed. Thinking, like you said, all the hype, all the, everybody's talking, Emma Stone's everywhere you go, and this is getting, high marks by other people, which I do recognize, but for me personally, I can't say I loved it.
That's where I'm at. I'm not at the I loved it camp. I loved parts of it.
Parts of it were good, but most movies you don't want somebody to say, hey, I'm dissecting your movie. And I like this, and I'm laughing because of the whole story of he's just kind of a mad scientist. So I'm not trying to dissect it, but that's what it felt like. The sum total I wasn't impressed with, but there were parts that I liked enough. But this was a movie, and I wanted to see the movie come together, and it just felt pretty disjointed to me.
You know what would have been interesting is if they would have turned this into a miniseries.
I would have watched it as a miniseries. If it was a thriller horror movie, even though I don't generally go to horror movies, but, I've read Frankenstein and all the, Dracula and all that. It seems like it would have fit well in that genre. Thanks for joining this week. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark, meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this movie review, you might click the link to check out our review of The Color Purple, or click the other link to watch last week's show, where we reviewed The Iron Claw.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.